Welcome everybody to Radicalized Truth Survives. My name is Heidi Cuda. I'm here with Jim Stewartson and High Fidelity. We want to welcome everybody to our show. It is a holiday themed episode, but not really. We have some very serious subject matter, but we're still going to do it with pretty things in the background, like my pink tree and my gorgeous light up mannequin. But seriously, I'm here with my friends. We are an investigative show about disinformation. I'm here with two of my favorite people, as well as two incredible disinformation researchers. Um, Today, we're going to be talking about the real border crises, and it's a crisis for justice for immigrants and immigrants' rights. And we have our friend to the show, Juan Botero, who's going to tell us so much about the lethal injustices occurring at the border, where it ties into profiteering, stochastic terrorism, and the very interesting history and how it relates to authoritarianism and even 1930s, 40s Germany. So, fascinating episode. It's not warm and fuzzy, but it's so damn important. And you don't watch this show for warm and fuzzy. I just happen to be girly and I like my warm, fuzzy background. All right, guys, jump in the front loaded. Yes, yes, Jim has snowflakes.
Right in the middle of my forehead.
The world outside is frightful, but this show is so delightful.
Front loaded.
I have a heartwarming story about a priest that was just defrocked, and it could not happen to a more terrible human being. MAGA priest Frank Pavone, you might know him as the person, trigger warning, who actually the day before the 2016 election, as he was demonizing Hillary Clinton, actually put a aborted fetus on the altar, because that is how terrible this human being is. They say it's for human, to promote, pro-life ethics. That's not what this guy's about, and you will find more about that in my reporting, which I include here, that Shar Norris and I did, where we were talking about all of these extremists. And so he now is doing what extremists do. He's running around on his victimhood tour. Don't believe it. If the Catholic Church decided to laicize this guy, he was laicization. Hi-Fi can pronounce the word better than me. That is literally the harshest sanction from the church. They only do this to really bad cases, and this guy has a really bad case of MAGA, as well as all the tentacles that we find out of. Yes, Jim.
I would love if they would laicize Vigano, Carlo Maria Vigano, who used to be the top Catholic in the United States, and now is literally Steve Bannon, Mike Flynn, and Vladimir Putin's bitch.
Yeah.
All he does is go. He's literally in Q drops.
Right.
Mike Flynn put him in Q drops multiple times. He literally shows up on Mike Flynn's QAnon tour on video from Italy. He needs to be defrockicized. Fuck that guy.
Well, I think that this putting Mr. Pavone on notice.
Yeah, that's a good start. I like that.
It's a very, very big deal, and I
think
that
is heartwarming. Thank you for that.
Well, it's very important because these guys are part of
heartwarming stories of
right-wing extremism. Yes, high five.
I need to point out something that he was defrocked for his blasphemous posts. They considered what he did blasphemy. Mm-hmm. What they did not do is explain that what he was engaging in was psychological terrorism, and that the image of an aborted fetus on the altar is going to cause dissociation in his audience, which will allow him to implant thoughts into their heads.
I did a lot of research in the 2016-2017 period where I could not figure out why people who I knew to be good people, who happened to go to some various churches that were a bit extreme, became so hateful toward Hillary Clinton. radicalization, and it was happening in their churches through their priests and pastors. And this is not to say that every parish is like that, but what I'm saying is the ones that are really, really did a number on perfectly good people and kind people. And these people are no longer in my life because they become radicalized. And as much
they
as
did
I
that shit on the left too.
I know it's very important to know erstwhile priest Frank will go on the victimhood tour. He's already on it. And just to go straight to the chapter on victimhood in Jason Stanley's How Fascism Work, so you do not buy it. Okay. So, and also please read my network story, my very first interview with Dave Troy, which shows all the connective tissue between the MAGA extremists, religious extremists, and the Kremlin extremists. So you can see that the Vatican stepping in and the church stepping in and defrocking this guy is very important. And I ask that they defrock Mike Flynn too. If we're defrocking and getting Christmas wishes right now, why can't the military defrock Mike Flynn?
I don't know if he's frocked. Is he?
No, but I just.
Oh, I'm saying he's completely frocked.
Yeah, frocked Flynn.
We're gonna be defrocking and flocking the entire episode. Okay, so next item, my arrest Trump plea. It is very serious that we do not allow authoritarians to continue to stay in power. We know that the January 6th committee is voting to urge the DOJ to pursue criminal charges against Trump. And yeah, that's all very nice. As Jim says, we are so far past the norms and what's nice and what may or may not happen. And I bring this up because the mayor of Istanbul, who was somebody I learned about in Ruth Ben-Ghiat's Strong Men book, he was somebody who actually ran on a platform of radical love. He would give hugs in the street, and he became the most popular politician in Turkey. And he right now is in prison. He was sentenced to prison for 2 years, 7 months to ensure that he would be detained ahead of the next election next year. And people in Turkey are protesting in the streets, thousands of them. They know this is an abuse of democracy. This was a political hit. And why I am bringing this up is because if you allow dictators to stay in power, then the wrong people will go to prison. The wrong people will, have be behind bars or even worse. And I mentioned in the Substack Navalny, and I also mentioned the previous opposition leader in Russia who was on his way to protest and encouraging everybody to join him at a protest against the original attacks in Ukraine when he was murdered right in front of the Kremlin. So it's not a joke. Like, it's very nice that we're going to get recommendations, but I think that it's time to really indict and arrest the chaos agents in America. And there's too many of them. Am I right? Trump, Flynn,
yes.
Can I just point out something? We know for a fact that Erdogan is conspiring with organized crime in Turkey. I mean, there are people who have turned witness against him, right? We know in Italy, Berlusconi was working with organized crime. Why do people not see that Trump and Roger Stone and the entire cadre of these ruffians are working with organized crime? What
because big business likes fascists. That's why. And I defer you to our episode with Jason Stanley. And I'm going to that's the most read thing I've written on my Substack. And I'm going to keep on bringing it up because it was a link for me that was missing. I did not understand why business leaders would be such shameful opportunists. Now I do. And they need to be called out, and they need to actually suffer the consequences of what happens when people stop supporting your business because you support fascism. So there you go. Quick mention of Twitternacht. The media continues to downplay fascism to great peril. Jim did a fantastic essay on this as well. As you know, a bunch of reporters were knocked off of Twitter. The fact that they were replatformed, some of them the next day is not the point. The point is that, we're at war. It's always been a war for truth. And I want to thank people who actually 40,000 people read the story that I did for Byline Supplement on this very subject, where Jim is quoted. And we understand that these communication platforms are weaponized for nefarious purposes, and the reports are still trying to frame it in a sensible way. Even reporters I adore are still trying to make it seem somehow normal or plausible, when in fact they're not calling the war as it should be called, in my mind.
Yeah, look, Elon Musk is creating 8chan. He's building a radicalization engine in public with 121 fucking million followers. It's not, you know, it's not.
Shouldn't be that hard.
It's not fucking hard at all.
Yeah.
What he did with those journalists, that is what every single gaslighting abuser ever does.
Yeah.
Right? Oh,
Yeah.
you know, I'm going to take something away from you and I'll give it back, but on one condition. Right?
Also,
every single reporter, whether they like it or not, is going to think twice about criticizing Elon Musk on fucking
that's
Twitter.
right. I mean, it's
And
about.
so every single reporter who stays on there and continues without acknowledging the scenario, the context that they're reporting in, is being negligent.
Well,
they need to be very clear if they're going to stay on that fucking platform and help Elon Musk make money from radicalizing people, that their message makes it worthwhile. Because otherwise, all you're doing is helping us slide into the Fourth Reich. Sorry, I had to get my TED Talk out.
I'm so glad you did. Thanks to y'all, I downloaded all of my archives, so I have all that material, and I'm very relieved because that is my life's work. And my life has been filled with many things that I'm very proud of, but this fight against fascism in America has been, I think, the most valuable contribution that I personally have made. And I will continue to fight the fascists because I do not accept a fascist America. Speaking of Jim and TED Talks, I encourage everybody to read his latest Substack, Divide and Conquer.
I'm going to talk about that.
Well, the only reason is that he brought me right back to high school, because he talked about bullies stealing your lunch money and giving you a wedgie. And that just brought me so much joy that I'm encouraging everybody to go get that joy
I was
well.
specifically talking about him, you know, ratting off journalists because they hurt his feelings, you know, and they were tweeting assassination coordinates. You thin-skinned snowflake, slimy little fuck.
That wasn't the point.
I swear to God.
That wasn't the point. That wasn't the point. The point was silencing a few to put fear in, you know, many.
Of course.
And that's authoritarian tactics.
It also comes from a very malignant narcissistic place.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
He hates them. Like he this morning or yesterday, Taylor Loren.
Yesterday, yeah.
For doxing him sometime in the past.
Yeah.
It's so
It's
stupid.
Excuses and it's lies.
And it's not funny.
It's reason to make people fear him, to dominate them. Yeah. To help create this insulated echo chamber where nobody can go outside the lines.
Unfortunately, the reporting from people I respect are dancing around it too much. Oh, just a petulant, you know. No. He's transmitting message. He's transmitting messages for Putin. There's nothing just petulant about that. Yes, Jane Goodall.
Actually, Jane Goodall got it correct. And what she said was that Trump was acting like a chimpanzee attempting to intimidate other members, right? Mm-hmm. I would argue that every single one of these sociopathic narcissists can be defined in the same way. They're a bunch of chest-thumping chimpanzees who are doing their best to scare people into line because they know that what they're attempting is a violent overthrow of the current order, the crashing of civilization, and installing themselves as the new Führers.
I want to leap, and I mean this sincerely, to the defense of chimpanzees.
I was going to say the same thing.
Chimpanzees have empathy, and
that's true.
and caring. Like they like if you, I mean, they don't fuck with chimpanzees either.
Yeah, yeah.
But they you know, in many ways are some of the best qualities of human beings. And people like fucking Musk and others who are psychopaths and have no empathy at all, you know, in my opinion, you know, are beneath chimpanzees.
Well,
fair enough. But the explanation of the behavior of these individuals can be likened to behaviors in other primates. That is,
I totally agree. Totally.
And all I want to say is
I would prefer to be in a room with a chimpanzee than Elon Musk.
I do want to say that in all
Sure.
seriousness, the scenario that Hi-Fi just laid out, what their objectives are, is why we fight. That is not acceptable. So with that, let's move on to word phrase of the week.
Word phrase of the week this week, I'm going to bring my tech stuff into it. In technology, when we have a problem or when there is a security incident or bad things happen, we do something called a root cause analysis.
Ooh.
Right? And a root cause analysis is basically, it's more or less what you see here. You know, we have a problem. Let's gather our data, spitball what could have caused it, actually identify it by going back through the history, going through the logs, right? And then recommending and implementing solutions. I would argue that we are in the point of cultural evolution in not just our country, but in the world, such that we must make a determination now. Are we going to evolve and be a creature who follows rules for the benefit of all? Or are we just going to let monsters take over? Let's take a look at our root cause analysis and see what happens, kids. Seems like every time fascism rears its head, we keep kicking its butt. So maybe we need to fix the problem at the root.
Word.
There's your word phrase of the week.
Love it.
I mean, look, that's what we do here, right? That's what we've been. The whole point of this is to stop looking at the symptoms, right? Stop yelling about, you know, Jack Posobiec on fucking Twitter, right? Yeah. Why is he doing that? Who the fuck is he working for? Why are these people trying to subvert American democracy? That's how you're going to get rid of people like Jack Posobiec. That's how you're going to get people to justice, when you actually get to the bottom of it.
The root causes.
Because otherwise, you know, you're going to give people, you know, traffic tickets for murder if you're lucky.
Well done, Hi-Fi. Okay, why it matters.
Why does it matter? Why does it matter? By high fidelity.
Why it matters. First story this week. Trump's trading card gift. Yeah. NFTs.
Yeah.
Or TOC. And what do I mean by TOC? Transnational Organized Crime. Why? Because I will refer you to the facts. Thank you, Mr. Kurt Eichenwald, for doing the homework for me on this one. However, there is a startling similarity. No. Here is one of the addresses where the company that is selling the NFTs resides. Their post office box here in this strip mall. And then, of course, the business itself is registered here at 2710 Tomes Avenue in Wyoming, which it gets better. This address also has a couple companies registered at it that had Turkish agents who were defrauding the Department of Defense, while also, this is where it gets good, buying parts from Department of Defense suppliers, buying supplies from Department of Defense suppliers so that they could send the parts to Turkey, copy the technology, reproduce it cheaper, sell it back to our government. This whole thing just absolutely freaking reeks. I would like to point out to people that the NFTs were $99 per NFT, digital trading card, if you will. The maximum order you could have per household was 100. That leads us to $9,900. As we all know, the FinCEN reporting requirement is $10,000. Oh, yes, they do accept crypto. That's why it matters.
Thank you, Hi-Fi, and thank you, Kurt. You know,
wait, fucking listen to me, everybody. Crypto is a fucking chaos op.
yeah.
It's exploding on purpose. You got played. Get out. It's fucking bullshit. Those NFTs are gifts. They are JPEGs, PNGs. If you're lucky, you can screenshot it. You can screenshot your $99 NFT.
Oh, I'm sorry. I also forgot to mention Donald Trump took stock art and did not erase the watermarks on his images. Yes, it gets even better, folks. Holy shit. This is a criminal enterprise masquerading as a government. What the fuck is going on in my country?
That's right. And why is he still free? Which brings me to my first.
Actually, that's not part of the government now.
Well,
right now I'm looking at, Marty and I did this long interview, and I'm looking at all of Trump and Erdogan's ties and, you know, every single thing, the Turkish bank accounts, and, you know, why Turkey got removed from the Muslim ban because Erdogan called screaming he was going to take his, you know, Trump's name off of his twin towers in Istanbul. And it's just like, you know, I know that
Flynn took $600,000.
Oh, right. For some kidnapping.
In order to steal the election.
Yeah.
Turkey laundered Putin's money.
Yeah. Yeah.
And gave it to Mike Flynn so that he could run psyops on Hillary Clinton and steal the election, which he did.
I'm so mad right now. I'm going to put on some Christmas music right after this show. Oh my God, everybody, please. I'll post it again. Listen to that Victimone remix of Winter Wonderland. It's amazing. Okay, that was my Heidi coming back down from being angry.
Victimone. All right, everybody's gonna like this next one because this one, I'm only doing 2 stories this week, but this one is a multi-part story because I think people need to understand the history of some things, right? Remember that the Department of Homeland Security was formed in 2002 by Bush. And the 3 parts of this story I would like to point out to you. The story itself is the DHS is DOA. Part number 1, I would like to remind our viewers of when Immigrations and Customs Enforcement and Customs and Border Patrol were deployed at Black Lives Matter protests. All right, that's part number 1 of our story. I would then like to draw your attention to an exclusive that came out just a few days ago, where a 21-year-old intel analyst did try to prevent January 6th, but was stymied by other forces in the Department of Homeland Security. And the final part of this story, in our 3-part story, is that from this reporting in the OCCRP, we find out that hundreds of members of the Oath Keepers work for the Department of Homeland Security.
Right.
And this is a damning report, more than 300 employees. And these are just the ones who actually signed up for the Oath Keepers. We don't know how many inside DHS.
Right.
And reminder,
that's just one group.
This man here was just convicted of seditious conspiracy.
Yep.
And we have people pledging allegiance to this man, working for our government and doing unspeakable things in our name.
Yep. Thank you, Hi-Fi. That's always when your military training comes out. I can always hear it in your voice. That report by OCCRP, by my friend Kevin Hall, former McClatchy, incredible. And that report really exists because, you know, so much of it is related to the work of our guest coming up, Juan Botero. So I'm very excited for you guys to meet him. Well done, Hi-Fi. I guess we just move right along to Hellscape now, right?
Jim Stewartson's Hellscape. Oh, fuck.
This will be a heartwarming holiday episode of Hellscape.
Aren't they all?
Yes.
I try to put a little bit of Christmas and Hanukkah into all of my hellscapes. No, I kid. Today's hellscape is big picture what they're trying to do. What is the shape of the overall psyop? It's scary because Elon Musk has taken over Twitter. Let's be very just straightforward about it, right? Mike Flynn is also raising his game. And I want to talk about these two things and how they interact, because just yesterday they interacted in a very blatant way that I think needs to be understood. But first, let's talk about what Mike Flynn is up to. So in the past, I've talked about fifth generation warfare, which is just a bullshit term that Mike Flynn made up. It's all it is a recapitulation of fourth generation warfare, which is William Lynn's philosophy. He's a paleoconservative, which means he wants to take us back hundreds of years. It's his idea of destroying America from the inside out by creating Christo-fascist terrorist groups and identity politics across America, having states become radicalized and secede, all the things that Mike Flynn and his allies are trying to do. That's what William Lynn basically invented in the 90s. So Flynn is just, has been talking about that for some time. But recently he took it to a different level by actually writing this book and getting Amazon and Barnes and Noble to sell it. I can't begin to explain to you how dangerous this fucking thing is. It is an instruction manual. I called it a dirty bomb. This guy this dude on the right over here is his co-author, who's a psyops guy in the military who used to work for Flynn. And the entire book is an instruction manual on how to psyop your fellow Americans into fascist propaganda in order to brainwash them into a death cult. That's what this whole book is about. There's nothing else that it can be interpreted as. Flynn, pretends very slightly that it's, just telling you what the other side is doing, but there are checklists about what you should do. And then there's propaganda about all the, the evil, libs in the world that are trying to take your children and all of this bullshit in between, telling you exactly how to psyop people, how to brainwash people, how to create in-groups and out-groups. It is extremely sophisticated material and extremely dangerous. It's all the things that Flynn has been using on Americans, everything that Flynn has been intentionally using against Americans. He's claiming that he's now using against us. Sorry, I think I fucked that up a little bit, but I think you get the idea. So all of this entire book, and I've detailed it. If you're not on Mastodon, you should get the fuck off Twitter and get on Mastodon. Please follow me, Jim Stewartson at toad.social. And I go into a lot of detail about this entire operation, about exactly how his manual works and what he's trying to accomplish. Flynn is the front guard. He is pushing the violence. He's pushing the propaganda as hard as he can. But he's not alone in this project anymore. I mean, he's never been alone. He's had Steve Bannon and Roger Stone and Eric Prince, not to mention, Vladimir Putin. But now he's got a new ally. Maybe not a new ally, somebody who's always been an ally in some ways. But now that ally is just coming out. And that, of course, is the guy I'm now calling, instead of Elmo, I'm calling him QAnon. Because what he is literally trying to do is recapitulate QAnon, but instead of on fucking 8chan with a couple 100,000, anons, it's 400 million elites in across the world that are basically a captive audience on the platform he bought. So part of his operation to eliminate liberals, or at least shut them up, to radicalize his platform, is this bullshit, the Twitter files, which I have talked about before here. I'm not going to recapitulate too much, except to say that he's using, some of the most prolific Kremlin propagandists in the world, all of whom contributed to QAnon and to the radicalization that led to the insurrection. It is not a coincidence whatsoever that Elon Musk is using this same group of Kremlin propagandists to psyop Americans that they did in 2016, 2017, 2020. There's nothing different about this except the scale. But to put a fine point on this, Elon Musk, his Twitter files LARP, has invited a new person. And that person is Tracy Diaz. I'm not going to play this, but let's just get a picture of it. So Tracy, this video is Tracy actually admitting to Donald Trump that she ran Q. She and her fellow Q dropper writer from Patriot Soapbox were there telling him, trying to take credit for it. And they did. They did organize the whole thing. She's telling the truth about that. And guess what? Here she is, right here in Elon Musk's Twitter files space, after he unsuspended her 3 days ago. Now, let's be clear. Tracy Diaz works for Mike Flynn. She's on the board of America's Future, which is his anti-democratic psyop that, he's been running for several years now, with his brother and a bunch of other propagandists. She runs Undercover DC, which is pure Kremlin propaganda, and she helps run the First Amendment Praetorians, who are Mike Flynn's personal guard and a domestic terrorist.
I just have a quick question. Can you tell our viewers why she was banned off of Twitter originally before she was let back on by Musk?
Well, she was banned with everybody else in QAnon, with Mike Flynn and everybody else, because she was just part of the propaganda operation.
Got it. So at some point after January 6th, or right after, they just flicked that switch and got rid of the QAnon operation on Twitter.
Yeah, exactly. And she was part of it.
Wow.
But they just let her back on, and not only let her back on, the reason they let her back on was to have her be part of the official Twitter files LARP that is being run by the CEO of Twitter.
Okay.
This is QAnon. What do we have here? We have Ian Miles Chong. I mean, for fuck's sake, we've had Cernovich, we have Tom Fitton, we have every propagandist imaginable in here. And it's being run from the top of Twitter, from the guy who's making all the decisions about algorithms, not to mention suspensions and everything else. It is one of the most dangerous situations I have ever seen, and I've seen a lot of dangerous situations. This guy is intentionally trying to recapitulate QAnon at the scale of Twitter, the town square. It's going to be the QAnon town square. It already is the QAnon town square to some extent, and it's going to get worse. Last note, another person who is going to be part of the Twitter Files LARP, and LARP for new viewers is live action role play, meets character, is Mark Andreessen. Mark Andreessen is a venture capitalist who founded Netscape and has been, a major Silicon Valley investor for decades now. Mark Andreessen has been invited by Ian Miles Chong's best friend, Mario Nawal, who is Elon Musk's rodeo clown for the Twitter Files, invited Mark Andreessen to be part of it, to discuss free speech, to discuss, everything about why everything Elon Musk is doing is great. She's a huge fan of Elon Musk. You know what else he invested in? Post.news. He's the lead investor in Post.news. Now, I'm on Post.news. You can follow me there, but I am concerned that this social media website has been invested in by someone who not only is actively helping Elon Musk now, gave Elon Musk $250 million to help him take Twitter over. So he's both investing in turning Twitter into 8chan, which is making all the liberals run away, and he's investing in the website that's trying to catch all the liberals as they run out of it. So I'm just saying, please choose wisely, be careful of who you get your information to. Oh, and by the way, the only way you can log into Post.news is either your email or Twitter. So that is the end. I know that was a little bit rambly, but I'm trying to bring us full circle from what everybody is seeing right now, all these suspensions, and oh my God, Taylor Lawrence got suspended, and Keith Old, what's going on, right? It's all part of the same thing. It's all part of a psychological operation to separate you from reality, to get you trapped in a radicalization engine, and defeat your resistance to what they're trying to do.
As we watch the extremist party, formerly known as the GOP, go ahead and do their photo ops at the border, ginning up fear once again of immigrants, which is part of their playbook, we are going to bring our next guest, Juan Botero, to tell us about the real terror at the border. And let's watch right now a clip of his film, Lethal Injustice.
In Hillary Clinton's America, the system stays rigged against Americans. Syrian refugees flood in. Illegal immigrants convicted of committing crimes get to stay, collecting Social Security benefits, skipping the line. Our border open, it's more of the same, but worse. Donald Trump's America is secure. Terrorists and dangerous criminals kept out. The border secure. Our families safe. Change that makes America safe again. Donald Trump for president.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
The border secure. The border secure. The border secure.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message. I approve this message. I approve this message. I approve this message.
Wow, Juan, the work that you are doing is so incredibly important, and I can only imagine what a passion project this must be for you. Can you tell us what drew you into this work?
Thank you, Heidi, and that's exactly right. It's a work of conscience. It's a project. It's called Blood Money. I understand when Steven Spielberg said that he didn't want to take $1 from the Schindler's List project because it's blood money. This is a project that started in 2002. I kind of stumbled onto this growing right-wing influence within the Republican Party, and I caught on very quickly what it was all about. So in 2006, I denounced this to Congress. I said, you guys need to stop this anti-immigrant, anti-Mexican faction within the Republican Party, or you're going to have a national crisis in 10 years. And sure enough, that crisis launched when Trump announces his candidacy. So I've been doing this research all over the border. I've accumulated basically evidence, and my project consists of evidence, pretty much like when the Allies discovered the concentration camps. The photographers were instructed to say, you are gathering evidence. This is not a documentary. You're gathering evidence for a court of law. And that's how I'm presenting this information. Testimonies, forensic evidence. I have witnesses, victims of these atrocities on the U.S.-Mexico border. So basically, the essence of my research, Heidi, is extrajudicial killings of immigrants, in particular Mexicans, and that there's a meaning to that, along the U.S.-Mexico border on U.S. soil by these MAGA vigilantes. Wow. So I'll give you a quick little preview. In 2006, I tried to stop the congressman who was the chairman of the Immigration Reform Caucus back in 2006. His name is Tom Tancredo. He's still alive. He's a soulmate of Joe Arpaio. So listen, very bad. Listen to this one. In 2006, Congressional District 6, I'm the only candidate to ever challenge Tancredo to a primary. Here are my issues, the playbook that I ran against in 2006 in Congressional District 6. The wall with Mexico. The Mexicans are going to pay for it. We need a Muslim travel ban. The Mexicans are murderers, rapists, and in this tone, this acid, acrid tone against Mexicans that was just so offensive. Yes, so where have we seen that again?
That sounded unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Yeah, that is the language. That is the language of genocide. I'm sorry.
That's exactly right. That is exactly right. So when I studied Tancredo, and this was a little secret in Colorado, the political class in Colorado is very familiar with this. He was traumatized as a child by his Mexican classmates at school, and he has launched on this lifelong trajectory to inflict revenge on the Mexicans as a people. So when I find this out, I said, you have no right being the chairman of the Immigration Reform Caucus at the U.S. Congress because you're conflicted. And from everything that he did in Congress for 10 years, every policy he passed was to punish the Mexicans as a people. Let me address the Mexicans issue. In Colorado, in Denver, and in some parts of the country, in some pockets, when you say Mexican, it's not necessarily referring to the people from Mexico. It's the N-word. It's a racial epithet to describe anybody of Latin or Hispanic descent. So somebody from Argentina, from Cuba, from Spain, they're all Mexicans, and it's the N-word. So for Latinos, so when Trump says, Mexicans are murderers, rapists, the coded signal to the white supremacist movement and to the militias that picked up on this, it's like it's the Latinos, and that's our guy. Trump is our guy. He gets us.
Right. Wow, this is so incredible. Jim, I'm sure you want to probably jump in because this is a show about radicalization. We investigate where it comes from, how it's occurring, and all the dangers therein. And of course, we talk about Oath Keepers here. Of course, we talk about how people are, how they create these violent militias. And Jim, when you hear some of the names he references, what goes through your mind?
Yeah, well, it's the same cast of characters in many ways that is, radicalizing Americans in other ways, right? So Trump and his cronies, he started with immigrants, started with Mexicans, right? But he then expanded that out, and I find it fascinating that a lot of these characters are the same. What groups in particular have you kind of connected to these killings? I'd like to know, who are some of the militias and other groups that you found that have organized to do this?
That's an excellent question, Jim. Well, I studied the Minutemen group because that's one of them. That's one of them. Minutemen, the 3%ers,
Wow.
Oath Keepers. There are others. They're very splintered now, but they have this common thing about Mexicans. Here's the problem in our culture, guys. When Martin Luther King comes along and the whole Civil Rights Act of 1965 and all this, we can't do this to the African Americans anymore. The problem is that right next to the Mexicans were, right next to the African Americans, that were being mistreated and lynched, were Mexican migrant workers or Central American migrant workers.
Yes.
But the cultural awareness, the light bulb that went off in America as a nation was like, oh, we can't do this to the blacks anymore. And what these eugenics, white supremacist group says, oh, so we have this little sliver left now, and that's why I called it the final chapter in the civil rights movement.
Wow.
The same atrocities that were being done to blacks are being done to Hispanic, Latinos, migrant workers, and this has been going on for about 2 centuries. There's actually a museum in Texas. There's some articles that have been written about it where they talk about the Texas Rangers, the Border Patrol, and the Oath Keepers list that you mentioned, Heidi, is very important because this is what many of us have been saying for years. The Klan doesn't need to wear white robes anymore. They're wearing a badge, they're wearing a green uniform, or they're wearing the blue uniform for Customs and Border Protection. They're in ICE, DHS, Border Patrol, and they're all in there, and that's documented. That's not just me saying it.
Of course.
But let me go back very quickly. I will say this because in 2006, I started to notice the parallels between Tancredo and what was the genre of Mussolini and Adolf Hitler. This demonizing of the immigrants,
Yep.
just this derogatory and this nasty, harsh spirit. The dehumanization, which is exactly what Trump did during his presidency and to this day. And that's how he kicked off his campaign. And every Holocaust expert and even the survivors said, we know, we've been through this already, and be careful.
Right.
And then other journalists started adding along. So I started to notice, and my conclusion, my summary is that what we saw with Trump was a translation, adaptation, and localization of that genre into American politics, wrapped up in the American flag. And there's two very key elements: the manipulation of patriotic sentiment. We got to defend America. That's what the militias are saying, and the manipulation of religious sentiment, which is the exact same thing that happened in Germany with the evangelical community. They were split. We got the whole cult of personality. Hitler is our savior, and today we see Trump's campaign, Save America, and there are all these messianic overtones.
Yes.
It's even worse than Save America, right? America First is currently the theme of the entire conservative, right wing.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. America First is literally what the American Nazis were doing in the 30s and 40s. Literally, the pro-Hitler people in America were the America Firsters. Charles Lindbergh. If you listen to Maddow's podcast at all, it's and they call themselves that on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's part of the code. It's a code. Mm-hmm.
They're signaling to the Nazis
right.
that are still here, and I'm so grateful for your work and what you're doing at the border.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Heidi.
I was going to say, we just had Jason Stanley on, the author of How Fascism Works, an incredible Yale professor whose family both perished in the Holocaust, and he is the child of survivors of the Holocaust. And he explains how not only the othering, the connecting, and then victimhood, making the oppressors look like the oppressed. But one thing that has been, and he also goes into why conspiracy theories are necessary in order to spread this disinformation, because people stop believing their own minds, their own culture, what they see, and they start kind of clinging to the strong man. But one thing that was staggeringly difficult for me to accept was he explained why the business elites back these authoritarians, why through the promise of lower taxes, regulation, dealing with labor movements, all of that. But in my research of the very issues that you talk about, people like Robert Mercer and their hedge funds profit off of these
immigrant detention centers as well.
Yes.
So there's all kinds of things at play here. There's not only the cover up and lack of awareness of these vigilante murders that occur, but there's also the profiteering that goes on with this.
It's a business. It's a business. So as part of my, it's an excellent point, Heidi. As part of my research and also part of my cash flow strategy, I worked for 4 years as a federally certified immigration court interpreter. And I traveled all around the country many times to these GEO facilities, which is a private company that owns these detention facilities. They are patterned just like the concentration camps were in Germany. Very remote places, very hard to get to them, very difficult for a family to come visit their loved ones. There's no hotels there. It's just like in the middle of nowhere. And it was GEO that funded the swearing-in ceremony for President Trump in Washington, D.C. when he was elected. Complete conflict of interest. And the other thing is, to your point, Heidi, many members of Congress or their relatives are stock owners in GEO, and there's another company, the name escapes me, that own these prisons. So it makes sense to them financially for their portfolio to have harsh immigration policies where detention is is mandatory. We got to put them in jail because that creates funding from the government and that sends their stocks up. It's a complete conflict of interest.
Oh my God. Hi-fi. I know you want to say something.
Okay. I have two. I'm going to ask the first one now. And the first one is kind of a historical thing, right? Racism against Hispanic people has been evident in this country since, William Randolph Hearst in his yellow journalism smear campaign against marijuana. He claimed that, evil Mexican plants that drive you insane, thus associating the word Mexican with something bad. That continued. It seems to me that this is a string of behaviors by white supremacists, predominantly in government, who have kept the flame of racism alive to enforce their own power and profit. Are there people, how do I say this? Who is fighting against this, and are they making any headway?
Against this anti-Semitism you're talking about, or
against this anti-Mexican, against this racism, against all of it?
Here, I'm one of them. Well, there's a handful of us. I'm not the only one, but there's so much to this. I have a private investigator in Arizona who's infiltrated these groups for 25 years. We made contact. I explained to him. His name is Matt Browning. We should have him on a show in the future. We'd love to. He has the whole detective side of it. I have the historical, political, ideological framework. He has the detective work. And then we also have, I'm sure you guys have heard of Jen Budd. She's a former Border Patrol agent who witnessed the culture of killings within the Border Patrol. She became a whistleblower, and she's now a pro-immigrant advocate. But to answer your question, what I'm bringing to the table is this perspective, because the deception by Breitbart and other groups is that the narcos, the drug cartels, are killing everybody on the border. Mm-hmm. I did counterintelligence work. I've been on the other side of the cartels. It's a very difficult type of work, but when you understand the business model of the cartels, it's a smuggling operation essentially, and they don't like to draw attention to themselves. They don't go around like Rambo killing immigrants for whatever reason, because that draws heat on the operation. Right. If you mess with them, they'll take you out, and they will take lethal action. But they have no interest in a random immigrant who's coming to America. But since the American culture is not aware of this, and that's why I appreciate this opportunity with you guys, it's like here's the strategy of these anti-white supremacists. They have positioned themselves in the marketplace of ideas as the experts on the statistics and intentions of the Mexicans. Let's talk about this for a second. So when we talk about in the media African American issues, well, we go to Reverend Jackson, or the usual suspects, so to speak, of experts from that ethnic group, or the same with Native Americans or women's groups. When we talk about the border with Mexico, it's Steve Bannon, it's Stephen Miller, it's Ann Coulter, it's Laura Ingraham, it's Donald Trump, it's white Anglo-Saxon European Americans lecturing us on the hearts of it. There's no go-to person of Hispanic or Latino background saying, well, this is what's actually happened. They go to Arpaio, it'll be Tancredo, it used to be Tancredo.
Yeah.
So for some reason, we have this double standard when it comes to statistics and the issue of immigration. That is a huge problem because that's where they've thrown in their misinformation. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, my second question, and you you inadvertently kind of answered it. We were warned about the infiltration of our law enforcement by the FBI decades ago.
Mm-hmm.
We have done nothing about that. Do you feel that these white supremacists have infiltrated Customs and Border Patrol, Immigration Customs Enforcement, Department of Homeland Security, and this is why they are an ineffective organization who is literally murdering people? They are murdering people in the name of our government.
So the Oath Keepers list is very significant because it exposes this whole connection, this whole mix of white supremacy within law enforcement. And then there's this ghost, cousin army, which is the militias, and they have been trying for decades to be deputized. Joe Arpaio is the architect of the concept. Now, the militias are patterned after the Einsatzgruppen in Germany under Nazis. It's the exact same concept. These are civilians dressed as soldiers, and they have uniforms, and they got the memo on how to dress. And if you look at the militias, there's a code, there's a dress code that they all follow very carefully. And this is the reason in my documentary we denounce, and Kate Spradley of Texas State University should be on your program hopefully soon. She's been trying, she and a bunch of other nonprofits in the US and in Central and South America that are processing these remains of thousands of bodies that are found littered across the border. They repatriate them to their families, and they've been begging the FBI for 12 years now, can we please cross-reference this DNA with your databases so that we can identify these bodies? It has not happened. And this is where the Brotherhood comes in, because this goes very, very high. It went to the White House with Trump, with Steve Bannon, with Stephen Miller, with a lot of people in politics that know what's happening at the border, and this is the game that's being played. Let me throw this very quickly because there are a lot of parallels with Nazi Germany, but I want to throw other reporters have pointed out, for instance, that Steve Bannon's model of communication at the White House when he was there on staff was identical to that of Joseph Goebbels. Mm-hmm. Another reporter pinpointed Stephen Miller as Reinhard Heydrich, a reincarnation of Reinhard Heydrich. Mm-hmm. I'm saying that the ICE is patterned after the SS. There's no question about it. The concentration camps are identical in terms of the layout. Kellyanne Conway, she channels, these are for your film students out there. Mm-hmm. Her name is
Leni Riefenstahl.
Riefenstahl, The Triumph of the Will. Thank you. Yeah. Leni Riefenstahl was a master propagandist, and Kellyanne Conway sold us Trump as this great leader, and he is the most corrupt leader we've ever had in the White House.
Of course. I just did one of my most recent reports. I took Trump's speech, probably written by Stephen Miller or his ilk, and I matched it against Jason Stanley's How Fascism Works Note for Note, and I showed the sections: victimhood, unreality, conspiracy theories. There was like three or four different categories in addition to those where it's exactly the fascist playbook. And one thing we learned when we had our friend Paul Mason on, who's an incredible investigative reporter out of the UK, is we learned, and maybe Jim already knew about this, that post World War II Germany formed an anti-fascist police force. So it was their job. They still have it. That's why they.
And they're still busy. And they're still busy.
They're still busy as hell. You got that right.
They have a growing problem now.
We need something like that here so we can actually root out the fascists within and the white supremacists within, because it is going to continue to be defective if we don't actually clean our own house. Jim.
I just wanted to I mean, so we're talking about propaganda, right? And propagandists. These killings, right? There's obviously just white supremacist hate behind them, right? That's certainly one motivation. But you mentioned another motivation is basically to create propaganda about cartels, right? About the Mexican threat, right? And these killings get transferred basically in terms of guilt from one side to the other side. What are the other motivations? I mean, this has been going on for so long and it's so widespread. What are the motivations behind these? I mean, beyond the, creating of propaganda about cartels and all of that, what are they trying to accomplish?
Excellent question. There's two things, and they're very sick. The first one, and I was in the military, and I worked Army, infantry, and I worked with a lot of law enforcement. There's a group within the military and law enforcement, which is the sharpshooters, your snipers. There's an experience that a sniper goes through when he or she takes out a target. There's an adrenaline rush of that moment, because it's such a powerful moment that they pick the moment and the location of the bullet, etc. There's an adrenaline rush. If that person is hanging out with the wrong crowd, they will come out of their chain of command and go look for that rush. And this is what many militias are saying. I came back all messed up, PTSD from Iraq. I'm going down to the border to make new memories. This has been published.
Oh,
this has been published. This has been published.
Wow.
There's articles about this. So that's the one thing. The other thing, the other aspect is we have to focus on the recycling. This is a recycling of what I call the old dragon of anti-Semitism. These white supremacists are fanatics about racial purity. Remember when Trump castigated, it was Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador with foreign aid. Remember that? Or when he was in that? It's called the Northern Triangle. What it really is Mesoamerica. This Mesoamerica is the Mayan region in Central America where these native cultures come to the U.S. and these are the migrant farm workers that are masters at tilling the land and growing crops that are essential to our economy. And they have a problem with that. But here's the other element of anti-Semitism, and this is a very important part of my project. In 2015, the government of Spain passed a law saying that if your surname was on this list, they published about 5,000 surnames. If your surname is on this list, we will give you Spanish citizenship. Or Portugal's also doing this still for reparations because we kicked you out of Spain back in the 1400s with the Columbus thing in that era. What this is, and these supremacists know this. This is the hidden agenda that I'm so thankful we can talk about. The Sephardic Jewish community is basically the Jews that came out of Spain to the Americas, the Central and South America. And this list that the government of Spain published is your phone directory from Mexico to Chile. Anything with an EZ, Hernandez, Perez, Cortez, anything with a Catholic thing like Santa Maria or Reyes or whatever. These are Sephardic Jews that took on Catholic names to hide their Jewish heritage. And many Catholics in Latin America are doing their genealogy thing, whether it's the DNA or the genealogy tree for all these apps now. And they're like, we're not Catholic, we're Jewish. What are we doing here? In Colombia, there's a big phenomena in Medellin. There's a big phenomena where they're building synagogues all over the place. It's like, we're not Catholic. So here again, guys, this is a very important point. This is the spirit, the recycling of anti-Semitism, where when you say Mexican, you're actually referring most likely to someone with Sephardic Jewish origin. And there are a whole number of ramifications of that. There are 12 tribes of Israel. We don't have time to go into all that. But that's the clearest parallel with Nazi Germany that I found in my research. Just like Hitler victimized the Jews, just like Trump victimized the Mexicans. If you take Mexicans and you put the word Jews on there, in this case Sephardic Jews, it's the same template. It's the exact same template. Let me close the thought with this. Stephen Bannon, Tom Tancredo, Stephen Miller are students of European history. They are Joe Arpaio also, by the way. Joe Arpaio, these guys are obsessed with the model of Nazi Germany. I didn't know this, but the concentration camps aren't what we think about. We think the buildings, Dachau, Auschwitz, etc. The majority of the concentration camps use tents, and this is why Joe Arpaio had Tent City in his when he was sheriff. He's putting these guys in immigrants, Mexicans, in tents where it was like 140 in the summer inside these tents, and he was the keeper of the prototype that got applied. And these militias that were working with Joe Arpaio were like begging to be deputized. I don't know if that's a key word. They were, asking Arpaio, please deputize us because we want to be part of your legitimate law enforcement. They said, no, you guys are a militia. But one of the things that came out with the January 6th Commission is that this group that was across the river in a hotel, all these weapons, they were waiting for Trump to do what? To deputize them. I don't know if you guys heard that from the January 6th, but that's a key link. They were waiting to be legitimized by the president to go ahead and overthrow our democracy. And there's a whole other Russian connection that we haven't even touched on, but I know you're looking into that.
Yes,
and you're
that's
absolutely
our sweet spot.
And here's what came out of the research on the border. It's a completely unexpected link to Russia with the funding for the militias. And then when you look at Trump's family and his inner circle, he's been completely penetrated by the KGB. And that's another program. Of course. But that's part 2 of my. I'm just going to say this. I'm going to plug my
we
research.
Want you to.
I'm going to plug my research. There's 2 parts. The first part is what we're talking about today, the border. And that's what's being investigated by the January 6th Commission. Part 2 is Trump's penetration by the KGB, and that's what's being investigated in Mar-a-Lago. So hopefully that'll be our next program.
I can't wait to have you back. One thing I want to say while you've been talking, Juan, is that I did look up the organization that did the investigation into Mercer's profiteering and Rentec's profiteering off of these concentration camps. Yes. And Core Civic is the group. Yes. They owned hundreds of thousands of shares in Core Civic. It was worth a few bucks before Trump started doing all of his fear mongering about immigrants. And right after 2017, the stock just soars. And so it would be very remiss of us not to also take a cold look at who profits off of this misery.
Members of Congress and their families. That is a huge conflict of interest.
Oh my God. So I think that's one really important element that I'm hoping that people run with it and investigate it. And I'm so grateful for the work that the OCCRP is doing. That's what led us to you. It's very important that, that these groups and organizations continue during this time of just, radicalization, authoritarian capture, that people like you and us keep doing this work. I do want you very much to tell us about your film, your show, and how our viewers can help. Our viewers are very generous. So if you're doing any crowdfunding or if there's a way they can reach out to you, that would be amazing.
Thank you, Heidi. Basically, I've been self-funded until now. This has been a project, a labor of love, a project of conscience. Started in 2002, 2006. I've done some other things in the meantime, but when Trump announces and he repeats the playbook that I tried to stop in 2006, I basically came back to focus on it. So I've self-funded the pilot that you've seen. There's the promo that you saw, and then there's a 55-minute pilot with the money I was making working in court and other projects. It's supposed to trigger an investigation. I've been told by many attorneys that my research and the evidence that I present clearly exceeds the threshold to justify a congressional or criminal investigation into extrajudicial killings on the border by these vigilantes. And that needs to be uncovered. That needs to start. There's all kinds of other consequences that we don't have time to talk about. What happens when you kill people and you spill their blood on our soil. There's a whole other thing we need to talk about. But I would really appreciate if people, I sent you the phone number. I don't know if you want me to list it or I can mention it.
Mention it.
Okay, thank you. 202-427-4430. 202-427-4430. Please call me. I would like to talk about your interest. If you're interested in donating, we are setting up a 501c3 with
Fantastic.
the conversation with OCCRP. They've been very supportive, and that's why they went into the whole Oath Keepers thing.
Fantastic.
And they were not aware of this whole the mindset right now in the American public is like I said earlier, the cartels are killing all the immigrants. I'm like, no. When the militias go down to the border, they're there on hunting trips, and they're there to get their fix, their adrenaline rush. I have forensic evidence. I have recordings. We have audio recordings. And when they say defend America, they're justifying their lethal action because they're protecting the country. And Trump is their savior, and Trump's going to cover our back. And the pardon of Joe Arpaio, that's what the investigation was headed at, because they were pointing at this whole topic of Arpaio's profiling. And his pardon sent a message to the militias saying, don't worry about what you do at the border. Trump's got your back. And that's what it's called, domestic terrorism. If you go out into a crowd like the guy did in Vegas at that concert, and you shoot a bunch of people, it doesn't matter if they're citizens, it doesn't matter if they're from another planet, that's called domestic terrorism. So when you go down to the border and shoot people on US soil because you think they're, invading our country or for whatever reason, that's called domestic terrorism. And Trump has been aiding and abetting domestic terrorism. That's part one of my research. I do have a Facebook page, Lethal Injustice. Look me up on Facebook, and then please call me. We do have some synergies that we're looking into with Netflix, and we have everything.
Great.
We have
You've
the
done the
subject matter
work.
experts.
I mean,
we've done the work, and it's time to publish.
This is the real border crises, and that's what's so just incredible in listening to this, is that they've ginned up a crisis for profit and for all the things that authoritarians do. But the real crises is what your work is documenting. Is there something you can leave our viewers with so they understand the scale of this and they don't think that these are just one-offs? Because this should be one of the biggest stories, in our country right now.
I'm working on it, Heidi. I've been trying to blow this up for about a year in DC, and two people are like, well, I'm like, no, this is happening. I will say this. On YouTube, there's the first TV spot that Trump did on immigration. You can look for it, Trump on immigration, and it's in my promo, and it's in my documentary. And at the first 15 seconds, Trump rags on Hillary, blah, blah, blah. And then on the second 15 seconds, he talks about his immigration policies. He shows Border Patrol, National Guard, et cetera, et cetera. And in there, for a second and a half, for those of you in television, it's 46 frames, they show this militia striking a pose just like the Minutemen statue in Lexington, Massachusetts. It's the exact same pose, and it says protecting our border. Terrorists kept out, protecting our border. That's called aiding and abetting. That's an endorsement of the militia concept, or
That's right.
CONOPS. In the military, it's called CONOPS. It's a concept of operations where you have sharpshooters and special forces guys going down to the border to protect the border from the invaders, and they take lethal action against immigrants. If people study that TV spot, they'll see that dog whistle. If you don't know what you're looking for, you'll miss it, because it's sandwiched between legitimate law enforcement, and right. They close with the U.S. Navy. But right in the middle, there's an unregulated militia of a guy with an assault rifle protecting the border. And this is what Matt Browning, the investigator, has been denouncing, and Jen Budd and others. And like I said, I'm a handful of subject matter experts on this. But if you're a militia and you know the game and you're going down to the border to get your fix, and you see that TV spot, it's like, Trump's our guy. Trump's got my back, because it's showing this militia and this glorious magic hour, a beautiful silhouetted shot, the glorious. It's not denouncing it. It's just like our hero.
It's elevating it.
It's elevating the concept of operations, and that it constitutes aiding and abetting domestic terrorism. And I will close with this: the same people that are planning these extrajudicial killings on the U.S.-Mexico border are the same intellectual authors of the January 6th insurrection and the Charlottesville. These are all the same people.
100%.
And there's our connection, and there's our problem. And this is a challenge to our democracy. And we need to realize that this is serious, that these words have consequence. They've had lethal consequences on the US-Mexico border. And in Washington, they say in politics, I know where the bodies are buried, referring to scandal or peccadillos or whatever. I've been in Washington for 2 years saying, I know where the bodies are buried. I have GPS coordinates, and I have the remains, and I have the volunteers who go in there to find these bodies, process them with a forensic team, and then ship it back to their families. I know where the bodies are buried, and if anybody in your audience wants to help us with this project, please give us a call, because it's time to uncover this whole thing.
Incredible.
It's happening today. This is happening today.
Right.
I can throw a couple other things. There are volunteers group, for example. There's one called Águilas del Desierto, Eagles of the Desert, and then Paralelo 31, Parallel 31. These are volunteers. This is the 911 service of the immigrant families in Central and South America. They'll call these guys and say, my uncle crossed in Sonora on this day at this time, and he was supposed to call us from this city.
Yeah.
And they'll retrace the route, and they will find the body. And we're talking bullet holes, blunt force trauma, decapitations, mass graves, just like the Insights group did in Germany. That's happening today on U.S. soil, and it's funded in many cases by the Russians. That's our segue.
No, we know that, and when you give these groups, my heart just immediately thinks, I hope they don't get infiltrated, because everything that was ever any damn good that's fighting against all of this fascism gets infiltrated. So I'm just hoping and praying that these groups stay safe and strong.
Yeah, they're very clear. They're very clear, and they screen their people carefully.
Good.
And we're all very clear on Trump and his inner circle.
Good. We just interviewed Jack Bryan, Jim's friend, who's a director and producer and did Active Measures and The Search for Q, and his new podcast, American PSYOP, focuses on Wesley Clark Jr. And when I was listening to episode 6, when they're at Standing Rock, and Wesley Clark Jr. looks around and goes, oh, so many of these veterans have Russian wives and Russian girlfriends. Yes. Tell your colleagues to look out for the guys with the Russian wives and girlfriends.
Well, look, I mean, somebody else that Trump pardoned at the same time as Arpaio is Mike Flynn, Roger Stone, Steve Bannon. I mean, these are Russian assets.
We believe that there was pardon fraud committed
all the way to the top. So listen, Juan, I just wanted to say, thanks again for everything you're doing. It's incredibly important, and actually it explains a lot that I hadn't understood before. That the whole situation at the border has never made sense to me, and this actually helps me a lot understand
so much.
You just validated my project, Jim, because I'm putting the dots out there. I'm going to throw a few more dots, and I'm going to shut up.
No, keep going.
Last year, Lara Trump said to the people on the border straits, "Get your weapons and go down to the border." Yeah, that's a call to action to take. Yes, it is.
Stochastic terrorism.
That's a call to action to take lethal action against immigrants. Right. Ann Coulter did the same thing on a radio program with Laura Ingraham. President Trump, as president, said, "Shoot them in the legs." This is what the militias are doing. Mm-hmm. They'll wound them. The trick about crossing the border or surviving the desert is your range. How far can you walk in a day? They will wound them, and that way they can't make it, and then it's a slow, miserable death. There's a whole other thing about drownings on the border and in rivers near the border. These people will come from Africa to Brazil, through Central America, Mexico, and as soon as they cross into the U.S., they'll drown in a river that's 2 feet deep. And Matt Browning will tell you, and I know how this is happening, they'll stop them at gunpoint, and somebody will grab them, and they'll dunk them underwater until they stop moving, and then there's no wound, there's no nothing, but it's like, oh, they just drowned.
Plausible deniability, right?
This is happening today, guys. This is happening today. There are people being lynched. There are people being dismembered. Women being shot at, pregnant women that are crossing to have their child born in the U.S. are being shot through the stomach. I mean, you name it. It's depressing. It's hard, but we need to lock arms. And I thank you guys for giving me this time, because I feel, kindred spirits, and we're going to lock arms on this, and we have to denounce it. Trump is running for office again, and we have to stop this now. So appreciate it.
We appreciate you, and we are much more powerful in numbers. We may be dealing with billionaires, but these billionaires are also committing criminal acts, and we are going to find out very soon if we are a country with the rule of law still. So we are so grateful for your work and your passion and sharing all of this knowledge with our viewers, and I feel really fired up to continue to do some reporting on this and do everything we can in our power with the reach that we have, which we box above our weight, but we are global. People watch us all around the world. So
we just scratched the surface today. There's so much more.
You're going to come back, right?
If you guys invite me, we'll have plenty to talk about, and we have to start talking about Russia. Let me close with one last thing.
Yes.
Tom Tancredo, who's the intellectual author of this whole thing. He is a descendant of a guy named Tancred the Great. You can look it up on Google. Tancred the Great. Tancred the Great was a great crusader in the medieval ages in Europe, and his deal was persecuting Jews. There's your Sephardic Jews, and Muslims. And this is why Tancredo talked about the Muslim travel ban, which was passed on to Trump. The Muslim travel ban that Trump implemented right off the bat in his administration comes from Tom Tancredo, who's a descendant of Tancred the Great. I hope you connect those dots, but that's how sick this is.
You're looking at some.
No. Don't get me started on the Crusades and all that shit, because one of the most evil men in the world, Eric Prince, is fighting the Crusades. He's part of the Knights of Malta, which is this, next to Opus Dei, the most extreme Catholic group in the world, and they're literally fighting the Crusades. Eric Prince had on his murder vehicles in Iraq, they were called Templar 14, right? Because he literally believes it. So that's a really important point.
Joe Arpaio says when Joe Arpaio endorses Tom Tancredo, he says he's fighting a great crusade for us.
Yeah.
There it is.
They say the quiet part out loud now all the time. Jim relentlessly reports on this, and you've given us so many missing elements that I'm really looking forward to going down all these rabbit holes and reporting them here, reporting them at my Substack, as will Jim, and I also report for Byline Media and Byline Supplement. So we're going to do everything we can to.
I know where the bodies are buried, Heidi. I know where the bodies are buried. That's how bad this is. Seriously.
I know.
There is literally silent genocide occurring in our country, and
it's happening today. It's happening today as we speak,
and we just exposed some of it here. So I'm very grateful. I do have one last thing, and then we will let you go. What is in your heart that makes this such a priority for you? Because most people do not have the stomach for this kind of work. It's too scary. They tap out. It fractures families. Why are you so tenacious?
Thank you for that question. I appreciate it, Heidi. The answer is, comprehensive immigration reform, but my proposal starts with an H, humane comprehensive immigration reform, because Steve Bannon wants to do comprehensive immigration reform Nazi style. And when I presented my proposal to Tancredo, which is based on a survey of the immigrants, and they're saying, we want to pay restitution for the attorneys out there. We want to pay restitution. We want to pay a fine. Earn legalization. That has thousands of years of legal precedent when you pay a fine to become a citizen, or you pay a fine to make right something you did wrong. When I mentioned this to Tancredo, he said that's an amnesty, and that's the whole twisting of the thing. But humane comprehensive immigration reform has to be the next step, and next year is the year, because it's a non-election year.
Right.
That we need to bring these people into the system. They want to pay. It's a heavy fine, and they're able to pay it. And there are employers begging the immigration system, let us pay a fine for my employer. This is don't deport him, Your Honor. I've been part of these hearings where the employers come in begging the judge, he's my best worker, don't deport him. And the judge says, I can't, I have to obey the law. So that's another program. But thank you for asking me that. It's
we have like 6 different programs.
Who are the heroes in the House or the Senate who are working with you on this? Is there anyone? Who
there are some. There are some appalled, what I call appalled Republicans, and transparency. I consider myself an appalled Republican. I can't believe this has happened. There are some immigrants, and there are some senators and members of the House, and there's a number of them. But Tancredo's legacy is this cadre. It's a bipartisan cadre of anti-immigrant members of the House, and that's the problem. And what I'm focusing on is to blow this up, because I'm saying here are the bodies, and once you start having bodies because of your policies, then it's time for a change. And that's where I'm pushing with this, for humane, comprehensive immigration reform. But have them call me. You guys have my contact information.
Great.
We're here to raise hell on this matter, and I'm not going to stop.
I'm all for raising hell, man.
Bravo. Bravo. Thank you
Appreciate
so
man.
much for
Thank you
coming
very
on.
much.
Thanks, guys. To the next one. Until the next one.
Yes, we can't wait.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Wow. Incredible.
Oh my God. Every time I think we have filmed our most important episode, someone like Juan comes on our show and we have filmed another incredibly important, vital episode. Please support that man's work. I love the ending too. The ending was like Beethoven's 8th Symphony, where you think it's over and then it keeps going, and then it ends, and then it ends, and it ends. So stay for all of the finales. We talk a lot about extremism on this show and how religious extremism plays into the events of what we're seeing in front of us. The woman you're about to hear from sums it up better than we ever could. Check out Amanda Tyler.
Chairman Raskin and Ranking Member Mace and other members of the subcommittee. I'm Amanda Tyler, Executive Director of the Baptist Joint Committee for Religious Liberty. As a faithful Christian and a patriotic American, I am honored to be here this morning to offer testimony about the connection between Christian nationalism and white supremacy, why Christian nationalism must be addressed, and why I believe Christians have a special responsibility to address the harms of Christian nationalism. BJC has a long and consistent record of defending religious freedom for all, supporting both of the First Amendment's religion clauses, the no establishment and free exercise clauses. We chaired the coalition that pushed for passage of RFRA. In July 2019, BJC launched Christians Against Christian Nationalism. It's a grassroots project of Christians from every congressional district in the country who oppose the rise of Christian nationalism and its threat to our faith and our country. Christian nationalism is a political ideology and cultural framework that seeks to merge American and Christian identities. It suggests that real Americans are Christians and that true Christians hold a particular set of political beliefs. The Christian in Christian nationalism is more about ethno-national identity than religion. Christian nationalism is a gross distortion of the Christian faith that I and many others hold dear. Opposition to Christian nationalism is not opposition to Christianity, and a growing number of Christians feel a religious imperative to stand against Christian nationalism. Christian nationalism uses the language, symbols, and imagery of Christianity. In fact, it may look and sound like Christianity to the casual observer. However, closer examination reveals that it uses the veneer of Christianity to point not to Jesus the Christ, but to a political figure, party, or ideology. Christian nationalism often overlaps with and provides cover for white supremacy and racial subjugation. It creates and perpetuates a sense of cultural belonging that is limited to certain people associated with the founding of the United States, namely native-born white Christians. Christian nationalism is not patriotism.